Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we are doing a Song of Ice and Fire open Q&A. As always, I will be basing this on questions that I get from my patrons, trying to pick up as many questions as I can in the chat as we go through. But today, probably most importantly, today is something I try and do a couple of times a year, is a charity live stream. So if you are watching live, then this is all in aid of Alzheimer's research, basically. It's Alzheimer's Global International, which is the overarching organization which helps support those with Alzheimer's, those who are caring for those with Alzheimer's, and also the crucial research into how do we actually finally defeat Alzheimer's. If you are one of the people who hasn't been personally affected by Alzheimer's, by dementia, it's probably just worth saying this is a cause close to my own heart. It has to be said. When you know someone close to you who is dying from Alzheimer's, it is a cruel disease. Just seeing parts of them slowly just drifting away, things that they know they love, parts of who they are just going bit by bit by bit until it's just a shell or a husk of the person that you love, but you still have that person there. So as I say, this is a horrible disease, but research is being done to make this thing, hopefully at some point, a thing of the past. And if one good thing can come out from this pandemic, what I hope is that we can see as a culture, as a world, the value of scientific research. And this is one place that I think really we're so close to making some huge breakthroughs. So if you have a little bit of spare pardon me, if you have a little bit of spare cash, then I would hugely appreciate it. There is a link in the live chat. If you're watching this later, I'll just leave this open as well. There'll be a link somewhere down below this video. So please do consider, if you are able, making a donation. I would hugely appreciate that. And talking of which, we did have some donations actually before we went on air. Lyle Hammock, thank you so much. Just now I see that, and also Karen Thomas, 26 Art Girl, Mara Lee, Brendan, Dawn IE, Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, which is a great name, Carl Karsnark, and a couple of anonymous donations as well. Thank you very much. I may well have missed a couple as well earlier. I didn't catch everything just before we went on air, but thank you. I hugely appreciate that. So that is going to, and again, anonymous, thank you so much. That's going to be open all the way through this stream. I'll mention it again a little bit later. But what I want to do today is have an open Q&A about A Song of Ice and Fire, but also particularly, pardon me, I've got a bit of a cough. As I wasn't around last week, there are a couple of bits of news out there that I thought maybe you've missed, but it's probably worth sharing. The first, I think there's lots of Witcher news. We had WitcherCon happened. This is one of many online conventions we've had this year. This was drawing together the three parts of the fandom of The Witcher, the TV show, the books, and also the video games. Trying to bring all three, over 2 days, all three together, to merge them together in one kind of cohesive lore, and hopefully, I suspect, one kind of cohesive fandom. Now, WitcherCon may be a real world thing next year, but I suspect that we'll be able to look back at this and say this is also the moment where the Witcher fandom, the Witcher lore, was brought together all in one place. But in a very sort of real world perspective, we did get a few extra bits of information coming along. The first is The Witcher Season 2 will be on the 17th of December on Netflix. So we always thought it was going to be towards the end of the year, but we now have a date for that. Secondly, Nightmare of the Wolf, which is the Witcher spin-off. This is Vesemir's origin story, for those who know the character of Vesemir being Geralt's mentor. This is an anime movie. We already know it's got a running time, 81 minutes. We got a full trailer for it, and we also got a release date, the 23rd of August. I would highly recommend you go and check out the the trailer. If go and have a look on my Twitter, if you don't know where to look, where else to look, it is looking pretty good. It has to be said. It's not a huge sprawling film. From what we can see, it's going to be quite tight, quite focused in on him, and also bringing up a lot of the imagery that we can see in the teaser trailers for season 2 of The Witcher as well. So that's something to be looking forward to. A few more donations. Thank you so much. This is very, very generous. Anonymous, Jean Henry Lindgren, Myone3690, Vote 4P3DRO, Anonymous again. I'm probably going to miss a few of these. Ariel Winchester. Oh, very generous, Ariel. Thank you so much. The Real YT and James Parham as well. Thank you for and Anonymous. Thank you very much. I hugely appreciate this. If you'll excuse the slight digression, I always find these an incredibly wonderful and humbling thing, being able to do this, to choose a charity, something that I think, a cause that I think is important, and just put it in front of people and say, I would love it if you can support this. It means a huge amount to me. So thank you so much. And also, it's part of what I want this channel to be doing, is not just being there to celebrate the things that we enjoy and love, but also trying in our own little way to be a little bit of good in this world. So if we can, and if you can afford it, then please do consider donating for an incredibly worthy cause. Also, a little bit of news on House of the Dragon, the spin-off that we've got for Game of Thrones, that they've started filming. They're probably a couple of months into that. I think they started that in May. And we've got a little bit more casting news, which neither of the actors, I have to say, I've previously heard of, but it's who they are, which is quite interesting, is that they are young Alicent Hightower and Rhaenyra Targaryen. Now, why is that interesting? That's interesting because of what it tells us about the story they're telling. This is not just going to be straight into the Dance of the Dragons, Targaryens fighting each other on Dragonback. They are going to give us the history. So if we have young characters for those, then we are going to go back a few years beforehand and see the causes, the early seeds of the Dance of the Dragons. Now, I suspect they're not just going to start there and then go through in a very linear fashion. This is either going to be flashbacks, or maybe they will try and do a couple of storylines going along at the same time, just to show the cause and effect of certain things. Either way, the fact that they've announced these actors does imply that they've got more than just a very brief kind of few second flashback. These are actually going to be significant roles in some way. So I think this is interesting because it tells us how they are approaching this. And this is not just about battles and CGI and all of that kind of stuff. That will be there, do not worry. This is also going to be about the background, the politics, the history, the characters, which I think is a really, really good thing. So I'm pleased about this. It seems like quite a small announcement. It went up under quite a lot of radars, but I think that in terms of giving us a clue about how they're going to be approaching this, it seems like a very positive thing. Laura 7 Anne, thank you very much. That's very generous of you. Thank you. Sword of the Afternoon, thank you. Girl Next Gondor, John Potts, Trick, Will Vaughan, Greasy Strangler, Ryan Larkin, Katie. Well, guys, thank you. This is incredibly generous. Katie Smith, lots of people donating. I hugely appreciate it. All of you, thank you. That's very kind. And Anonymous as well. So thank you. And we're already over $500, which is amazing. So thank you. I've not even gotten to my first question. And C McBroom, thank you as well. So that's where we're at. What we're going to do today, I will, because this is a charity live stream rather than a normal one. Super chats are disabled, so we're just going. I can get the donations coming in. So I'm going to be focusing in my questions from my patrons, but I will dip into as many questions as I can from the chat. I'll just see what's there when I put my glasses on, to be honest. So hopefully I will pick up quite a few more. So let's start off with a question from Arkman saying, do you think the names of Valyrian swords foreshadow their role, in particular Heartsbane, Widow's Wail, and Oathkeeper? Oathkeeper may symbolize Ned having kept his oath in the past and Brienne moving forward. Widow's Wail is named after Catelyn, perhaps. But I feel it might play a role with Cersei in some way. So this is really interesting because it's part of everyone's headcanon now, and I think it's pretty fair and right, that the names of the direwolves, the Stark's direwolves, tell us about the fate of those Starks. If you've not come across this before, just work through it. The ghost, Jon, is going to die and then come back like a ghost. Sansa will end up being Lady of Winterfell, we think, that kind of thing. So that's there. Do the Valyrian steel swords, the names of them, tell us about their fate? And I think the answer is a bit. Some of them, yes, definitely. So I think it's probably fair to say that the sword Dawn, the ancestral sword of House Dane, that is going to help bring about the end of the long night. Dawn being the end of the long night, for example. The others, I think it's probably slightly less clear cut. It's not, George R. R. Martin's not writing a sort of a story where you have to decode everything all the time. Sometimes it feels like it, I think, when analysts like myself sort of go through and say, well, this means that and that means that. That's not how George R. R. Martin, he's not written it just as sort of A equals B and C equals D kind of, if only you understood the code, you would understand what's happening in this story. But some of the Valyrian steel swords, I think, very clearly do have some sort of a hint to the fate or the use of that sword. Now, you pick up, I think, quite interestingly, with Oathkeeper perhaps reflecting Ned keeping his oath. I think I would probably agree with that. So Ice, the Stark ancestral sword, so Ned's sword, was broken in two, reforged into two swords, one of which was Widow's Wail, one of which was Oathkeeper. Now, I think you can very easily see a link there with Oathkeeper. Ned does indeed keep his promise. That's one of his defining characteristics. And also Widow's Wail, Lyanna, we hear about her crying out. So these are very Tower of Joy focused sword names. So I think that's definitely there. Heartsbane, it's possible. We haven't really seen it as much in action in the books as we did on the show. That may happen later. I think there's a good chance that Sam will take it when heading north. So his ancestral home and Heartsbane is very, very close to Old Town where he is. He's going to be dropping off Gilly there. So when he does escape north, he will be going back. And he might as well, by that point, if he's already figured out, as pretty much already has, that Valyrian steel is valuable in the fight against the others, he will want to take that north. So I think he will take it north. I think it will have a role. I don't think it's clear yet whether or not that role is going to be chiming 100% with the Heartsbane name, but I like the idea that it might do. Few more donations. Thank you very much. Sin Bird, thank you very much. Anonymous, C Star, Anonymous again, and maybe one more. Stacey Burke, thank you. I think that's got me caught up there. Let's quickly dip into the chat. Adrian Birchall saying, in Deep Geek, did the others build the wall to keep the dragons out? I can see why you might think that. There are two key bits of evidence that suggest that might be the case. Firstly, it would appear, ice magic. The others use ice magic. Secondly, we have one story of when a dragon went to the wall and didn't want to cross, maybe couldn't even cross. So that perhaps could be the case, and maybe lost in the mists of time. Instead of keeping people out of the north, this is actually trying to keep the north, keeping the others out from the south. But I don't think that's the case. The whole raft of everything else that we've got seems to be all of the other stories we've got about why it was built, what it was built for, the clear line that this is preventing the undead from crossing it. That seems to be what the magic is. That seems very clear as well, and it does fit in with the stories and that we have, and the logic of what we have is if the original long night happened and the others got pushed back in some way, as seems to be the case, then yes, a defensive structure would have been set in place. So it fits. So I like the logic that takes people to this idea that maybe it was the other way around, but it doesn't seem to fit the wider narrative, I'm afraid. A question again from Arkman saying, could you do a ranking of the best rulers in Westeros and another for overall best Targaryens, those who didn't rule but would have been good or effective kings? Yeah, well, I'm not sure about an overall ranking, but I think you suggest Baelor Breakspear. Baelor Breakspear is the classic example of a good Targaryen. We see him briefly in Dunk and Egg stories. The Hedge Knight, he dies for Dunk effectively, and this leads to lots of existential crises on Dunk's case. Just why on earth, how is his foot is what he often thinks about. His foot was the thing which he could have lost his foot rather than have all of this battle happen and the prince die. And is his foot worth a kingdom? I think that's clear foreshadowing for something coming up in the future for Dunk. But Baelor Breakspear does appear to have been a good person, and he probably would have been a good king. You also suggested Rhaegar. Yes, to an extent, although Rhaegar, it's very noticeable. He did become obsessed with prophecy, and he became 100% convinced that his interpretation of prophecy was right. They look like early signs of somebody who gets very, 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 very focused in on one thing, which is the Targaryen. If anything, being the Targaryen issue, it is this. That's what happened with Egg, who again seems to have been a good person who became a good king for quite a while, but he became focused in on hatching dragons, and that led to the tragedy of Summerhall. So there are a few Targaryens that I would probably just name check. Viserys the First, I'll be fascinated to see how they put him across in House of the Dragon, because although he's not given a great write-up in Fire and Blood, to be fair, and he seems to have in many ways been quite weak, it's very clear that the realm flourished during his time, that there were opposing forces that could have come to fight each other that didn't, because of him and his political skills and sheer charisma in one way or another. So I think if you take a step back, he probably was a better king than at the time they gave him credit for. It's because he came after Jaehaerys, who everyone said was the great king. Jaehaerys was great in many ways, it has to be said. He did a huge amount of the things that were needed in terms of building the roads, establishing cohesive law systems, outlawing some bad laws, things like that. He did all of those, but also he tried to establish a few things like Targaryen exceptionalism, which was basically saying Targaryens are better than everyone else. We have a divine right to rule. We don't have to follow the same laws as anyone else. We are better than you, which got a very favourable write-up in Fire and Blood by the Maesters. But when you take a step back and actually objectively look at it, it's not very good. So there are no absolute paragons of virtue within the kings of Westeros. I would have loved to see what Rhaenyra would have been like if she'd been allowed to be queen when she probably should have been queen. But there's no one there that you can immediately say they are amazing, which is very much in line with George R. R. Martin's writing style and world building style, is that he does not like the idea of there being perfect humans. Quite right too. There aren't perfect humans. Everybody is flawed in one way or another, and he shows us everybody's flaws. Colin Carroll, thank you so much for the donation. Swagger Dagger, good name, thank you very much. Miss Man Jones saying, I believe that Melisandre is Raymond Redbeard's daughter, a former king beyond the wall. This explains her slavery, as he was defeated, along with her age and obsession with king's blood. Possibly. I mean, I think that the fact that Melisandre seems to have a memory of being a slave does rule out quite a lot of the theories that people have about who she might be. So I tend to the view that she is just a character without any connection to the rest of the world that we know, which is how the real world again works. George R. R. Martin does like the fact that there are some characters who aren't interconnected with everyone else. They just grew up, they achieved great things, and they're not secretly hidden some other character. So that's my default position. Yes, it's entirely possible that a lot of the wildlings to the north are kidnapped historically over time. Tyrosh and a lot of other places kidnapped some wildlings. She does have the red hair, which could suggest what a lot of wildlings have red hair, so that could suggest that. So it's possible. I think, however, this is something that we're not going to get a full answer on. It makes sense to me that she is from the east somewhere, if not starting off in Ashai, then somewhere over there, and so Ashai was the logical place for her to go, because Ashai is a very, very, very long way away. Just having a quick flick through for some. Miss Man Jones, Viserys is a great king that could have been. If you're talking about Viserys from A Song of Ice and Fire, then no. But if you're thinking about the great Viserys the First that I was just talking about, then absolutely yes. Egg, indeed, a few people are talking about Egg. Aegon the Fifth was a good king. He was a good person, but we haven't yet seen him at the end of his life, so we do not know exactly what happened there. Verek saying, speaking of north of the wall, how many people do you think live up there? Rough order of magnitude figures are fine, 100,000, a million. Yeah, I'm not going to put a number on it, to be honest. A lot. But I think the order of magnitude was tens of thousands, 100,000. It's not up to a million, but where they are at now is that there's been this mass movement. So the others seem to have been trying to clear people out from all of the north, and now they're going to be coming across to Hardhome. Hardhome is where a lot of them are gathered. Hardhome is the closest there was originally before the tragedy of Hardhome, the closest there was to a city there, and people are now gathered there. There are thousands gathered there. So how many there are left north of the wall is a matter of some thousands. We're not told exact numbers. George R. R. Martin does not want us to have exact numbers, but the more there are there, the more potential ice whites there are as well. We shouldn't forget. Okay, let's go to a question from Diego Godoy. Hi there, Diego, saying, "Hola, Robert. Do you think Arya will get to kill Meryn Trant? I read Sansa's final Game of Thrones chapter this week where Meryn Trant beats her multiple times, and it's disgusting, yes. This, besides killing Syrio, do you think Arya will cross him off her list?" Yes, I do. So she has her list, or in the books, it's her prayer, really, is how she thinks of it. The names on her prayer, her kill list. So she has been working her way through this. Now, my feeling with Arya in terms of when she leaves the Faceless Men, they will be happy with her leaving because of the fact that she will be wanting to kill some of the people that they want to kill. Now, Meryn Trant on the show came across to Braavos, and she killed him there. That's not what's happened in the books. She kills someone else there, or in the Mercy chapter, the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, she certainly does anyway. We assume that's staying as it was in the book when it comes out. But when she returns to Westeros, she will still have a list. I can't remember there's 6, 7, 8 people left on her list, predominantly Lannister based and predominantly down towards King's Landing. It's not predominantly Freys and the like. So she will want to head down south. Will she kill Meryn Trant? I think she probably will. He is hanging around, not a nice character, and yes, he did hurt Sansa, and yes, he was the person who killed Syrio Forel, so it will be absolutely personal for her. Anonymous, thank you so much. And another Anonymous, and Andrew K, thank you so much. And I should take this moment, moderators, thank you. You do huge amounts of wonderful work. I appreciate all that you do. Thank you so much. I've got a lot of wonderful moderators out there. So Mattia Dominique saying, "I'm finally starting A World of Ice and Fire. I think I caught up on most of it thanks to YouTube channels and podcasts like this, but there's still a lot of to learn and get deeper into." I think the one thing I would say about The World of Ice and Fire, it is excellent. I highly recommend it if you've not read it. This is... people sometimes talked about Fire and Blood as being George R. R. Martin's Silmarillion. The World of Ice and Fire is his Silmarillion. This is the history of his world and the peoples of his world. Now, what I would say when you are reading that is that George R. R. Martin has been very clear. Everything we have about this story comes from someone's perspective. He never writes anything which is objective. Everything is subjective. So everything we hear is from someone's perspective. The chapters, obviously, for Song of Ice and Fire, always from someone's perspective. Dunk and Egg is always from Dunk's perspective. The Fire and Blood and A Song of Ice and Fire are written from the perspective of the maester who wrote them. So do not expect this to be a telling of exactly, and I'm sure you, Matthew, you're very aware of this already, but just for anyone who hasn't read this yet, do not expect it to be an objective history of the World of Ice and Fire. This is still an in-world history written by characters within that world with their own agendas they are pushing. So you find, for example, that any woman who has any hint of magic, very suspicious to the Maesters. They're always trying to make them appear evil and witch-like and horrible. They are always pushing down, as we know the Maesters do, pushing down on the magic agenda. Magic is always bad and evil and wrong, particularly if women do that. You see that in Fire and Blood. You see that in the world of Ice and Fire. And the histories that they have, the stories from a long time ago, the legends, they are presented as that, as legends, as stories. We do not get absolute truths about what's there, which is the whole point of this. This is what George R. R. Martin is wanting. He is wanting us to see these things as not 100% true, but maybe there may be, like myths, there is some truth in there if only we can sort of pull out some of the strands of it. Jenny Bird, thank you so much. Very kind donation, Jenny. Thank you. Question from Anonymous. Also, thank you. John Paul saying, greetings from Argentina. Greeting back to Argentina. Do you think Rickon will play a big or more prominent role in the next book, or will he be a no plot like the TV show? He was always the forgotten Stark. Yes, he is always the forgotten Stark. So he will play an important role. It was quite interesting. The Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon, which was the book which came out maybe a year ago now. This was written, it's a collection of interviews effectively with the showrunners, the actors, the backroom staff of Game of Thrones, and also George R. R. Martin himself, just snippets of interviews. And a lot of it's a fantastic book if you're interested in the TV show itself, but if you're interested in little hints and tidbits about the books, it's got quite a lot in there as well. So one of the things is George R. R. Martin talking about how he fought for the inclusion of Rickon on the TV show, because the showrunners wanted to exclude him. They thought there are too many Stark children. People get confused by all these Stark children. Let's just get rid of the one that doesn't really seem to have much of a plot. And George R. R. Martin says, no, he's going to be really important later on. Now, on the TV show, obviously not really that important. But George R. R. Martin clearly thought that Rickon was going to be very important, which implies that in the books he is going to be very important. Now, I was mentioning earlier about the Stark direwolves, that their names do give away a little bit of the fate of their owners. Shaggy Dog, it's generally accepted, and I sign up to this, it's generally accepted that this means that his story is that of a Shaggy Dog story. Long, interesting, but ultimately pretty pointless. There's not much to it at the end, which kind of seems to undermine this idea that he has got a vital role. But I think the way that George R. R. Martin sees this is both are true. Rickon is part of the Great Northern Conspiracy, whether he wants to be or not. In the books, we've got this plot that the Boltons have taken over Winterfell, but not all of the North accepts this. They've got to go along with this for the time being because the Boltons are in charge, but there is a rebellion brewing. Now, House Manderley, the richest outside of House Stark and most powerful northern house, certainly isn't having any of this. They are Stark loyalists. And so they have managed to start up this plot to get Rickon. They've discovered that Rickon is on Skagos, and they have sent Davos off to collect him. Now, the plan is, the deal they struck is that, okay, if Davos collects Rickon, and if Stannis, because Davos, obviously Stannis' right-hand man, if Stannis accepts Rickon as the ruler of Winterfell, kicks out the Boltons, then they will all accept that Stannis is the rightful king. So this is the plan. They are going to bring Rickon back, and we will see this, I'm pretty sure, in the Winds of Winter. Rickon is going to arrive back, and he is going to be the figurehead of this campaign. The campaign by the Mandalese, and others will get involved as well, to get Rickon onto the throne. So he is going to be important to the plot, as George R. R. Martin has promised us. He is going to be very important. He's going to be the figurehead that will allow the opposition, the northern opposition to the Boltons, to gather themselves around and behind him. But he will die. That I'm pretty sure. Maybe his death is going to be an even more ironic and horrible moment than it was on the TV show. Maybe he is just going. Maybe the Boltons get kicked out, and Rickon's about to be put in his rightful position, and then he will die. Or maybe it will just be completely fruitless. Maybe it will be Ramsay. We're told that his pack of hounds have been trained to hunt wolves and humans. And what do we have? Rickon and Shaggy Dog, a wolf and a human. So it may be that that's just what's going to happen there. He can be both important and have a Shaggy Dog story attached to him, in my view. Anonymous, thank you for the donation. Yul Elson, thank you very much. Lady Pushkins, thank you. And I think that's me caught up there. The Swagger Dagger saying, am I wrong, or did George say that the House of the Dragon is going to be the true history of what actually happened, whereas Fire and Blood or the World of Ice and Fire is the biased or incorrect account from Maesters? I haven't heard him say it quite in that matter, but he certainly obviously understands the mechanisms of storytelling. And so if you have a TV show that cannot, it generally does not show things just from different people's perspectives, because you're not just in one person's mind and seeing things through their eyes and just hearing their thoughts. That's not how TV shows generally work. Shout out to Peep Show if you've ever seen that, though. But so what he's therefore, if I'm understanding correctly, saying is that this is not the Maesters' history. We are going to see what they were describing, which means that there may, this will be the truth of what there was, but that doesn't mean we will understand absolutely everything of what was going on. There will probably be some artistic gaps, leaving things open to the imagination. There will probably be some things where we're not shown exactly what happens, and we're just left to speculate. So yes, it will be true, but that doesn't mean this is the full and true and accurate situation about what happened. And I suspect he's probably also going to hold back from saying that this is canon with a capital C, for the same reasons that he held back from saying that the show for Game of Thrones was canon with a capital C. It's not. He's not going to be writing it. Others will be writing it. He has a role, but he is not there controlling everything about it. So it will be, I suspect, in the same way that he viewed the show and the books for the main story as being two different versions of the same story. That's what we're going to be seeing here. We've got the TV show version of the Dance of the Dragons, and we've got the books version of the Dance of the Dragons. Kevin O'Toole, when Varys told Tyrion the details surrounding his castration, Varys also revealed his hatred of magic as a destabilizing force in the world. How will Varys react when he learns about the connection between dragons and magic, given that dragons may play a central role in his plans to seat Fagon on the Iron Throne? Yeah, this is an interesting little tweak we've got here. So Varys does not like magic in the same way the Maesters do not like magic. However, Varys has got a favourite candidate that he has been developing and training for the Iron Throne. And it may well be that in order to get that candidate onto the Iron Throne, he has to come to some accommodation with the dragons, because he can't ignore the Varys is clever. He knows he can't just ignore the fact that there are some dragons who are going to be coming over to Westeros. So I think he will have to make some accommodation. However, like the Maesters, that does not mean that he has to like that aspect of things. And he could very well think in the long term he can get rid of the dragons. So I don't think that the fact, just because he accepts the reality, that doesn't mean he accepts that this is how it will necessarily be. I don't think he's going to survive long enough, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. But if it were the case, if everything did go to his plan, if Fagon did get on the throne, say married Daenerys and they had dragons, he would probably happily have the dragons and find them useful in the short term, but in the longer term, like the Maesters, perhaps would come up with some way of getting rid of them. Just having a quick flick through the chat. Karen Edwards saying, am I the only one who thinks Rhaegar is not dead? You're not the only one. Personally, I think he is, though I think that this is, and I did a video on it if you want all of my thinking on this, the argument that he might still be alive seems to surround this idea that he wore rubies on his breastplate, and rubies we know can sometimes cause a glamour, so maybe that wasn't him there. But the rubies were destroyed and his body was there. His body was burnt afterwards. People would have recognized if it wasn't Rhaegar. He was very distinctive looking, and he never returned. He was absolutely 100% convinced that he was going to win. He was absolutely 100% convinced, but that he was driven by prophecy and the prince that was promised. He would have made some appearance in the decade and a half since then if he were still alive, in my personal view. But I think there's a whole large amount of evidence to suggest that he did in fact die, and not much evidence to suggest he's still alive. It is my personal view. Joanna Lannister saying, when was Rhaegar's body burned? After the battle. It was burned there on the field afterwards. Question from Arkman saying, bit of a long one. What do you think will happen to the bloodline of House Targaryen by the end of the series? Do you think that if one of Dany's dragons is killed, that the curse with Mirri Maz Duur will be broken, as they are her children? The show brought this up in season 7, but did nothing with it. If this happens and Dany and Jon do the devil's tango, great phrase, do you think she will conceive? If she does, do you think a pregnant Dany will die to give the magic needed, as in the Azor Ahai prophecy? Okay, lots of questions in there. My first take is I don't think Mirri Maz Duur, what she did was curse. I think she merely was saying what the situation was rather than actually doing a curse. So I don't think she cursed Dany not to have children. I think that it's not 100% clear, but there is evidence within Dany's last chapter of Dance with Dragons that her moon cycle, as George R. R. Martin calls it, has returned. So I think that she can again have children. Now, if some of the dragons die, and I think they will, I think that is unconnected. Therefore, as Dany is not, in my view, under a curse, I think that is unconnected to whether she can have children. I think there is a fair chance that she will become pregnant. Now, you're right. Game of Thrones season 8 did bring this up. They brought it up more than just in like a passing moment. There's 3 or 4 times this was mentioned with regard to Jon and Dany, and then nothing happened with it. That probably, and it's very easy to read too much into this kind of stuff, but probably that is because they were told something by George R. R. Martin. So, but then decided themselves not to do anything with it in season 8 because they squashed it together a bit much. So what does this mean? If I were to guess, and this is a guess because we're still a long way away from this, but if I were to guess, then yes, Jon and Dany will get together. Yes, she may well become pregnant. And if Jon does indeed kill her, as I suspect he will, that adds an extra layer of horror to it all if he is killing his own child within her at the same time. And yes, that would be King's blood that he was murdering very, very clearly. So that may therefore allow magic to be happening while that is going forward. And I have... and I don't think this is tinfoil. This is a theory I had a long time ago. You can go back to a video I did well before season 8 called Will Jon Kill Dany? And I did wonder whether the third fire, we're told, the House of the Undying were told that she will light 3 fires. The third fire that she will light, it may well be the sword itself that Jon kills her with. He draws it from her and it becomes Lightbringer, which we're told burns. That would... This is high fantasy by this point, but this makes absolute sense. Dany, in terms of the fires that she lights, do not forget she does not herself light many fires. We do not hear about this. Yes, she uses the dragons a lot. They light fires. She personally does not light a lot of fires. She lights a fire for the funeral pyre of Khal Drogo. She will almost certainly burn the fire at the Dosh Kalin and Vaes Dothrak, as he did on the TV show. That was foreshadowed also in the House of the Undying. What's the third one going to be? I think her lighting Lightbringer makes a lot of thematic sense to me. Benjamin, thank you so much for the donation. Marty, also thank you. Hugely appreciate it. Mike Hall saying, I have no personal experience of Alzheimer's, but it took Terry Pratchett from us. The only time I've been genuinely upset at a celebrity death. Yeah, it did indeed. It did indeed. If you ever want a really moving, I have no idea where to find it. It was done. I think it was on the BBC. Terry Pratchett allowed, in his last couple of years, he allowed a documentary to be made about him and Alzheimer's. And if you want some very first-hand account of what it's like living with and caring for someone with Alzheimer's, that is absolutely fantastic. And it shows what it does to someone. With Terry Pratchett, if you've ever read Terry Pratchett's books, you'll know he's never short of wordplay. Is a wonderful writer, and the camera was on him when he was trying to write, and Alzheimer's was eating away at him, and he just couldn't remember words, and it was truly tragic because he had an assistant who understood him really well, and between the two of them they could get things written down, but it was a very slow process because he just couldn't do things. And there was one time when he was getting dressed and then he had a tie around his neck and he just looked at the camera. I've forgotten how to do a tie. And it's just moments like that that's it's very touching. So I don't know where to find it. I can't remember what it was called now. It was called something like Living with Alzheimer's, Terry Pratchett. Do check that out if you can. Karen Edwards, do you expect all the prophecies to be fulfilled or revealed or explained in the next book if we get it? That's not quite how George R. Martin seems to work here, in as much as some prophecies, yes, we can point out and say that happened, but what George R. Martin is most interested in is people's reactions to prophecy, how people react to it, what it means for them, what the Maggie the Frog's prophecies mean is, and whether they're true. They are mostly true, as far as we can tell. But whether they're true matters less to George R. R. Martin than the fact that Cersei absolutely believes they're true. And this drives her. This is what pushes the action forward. The fact that she is looking for who is the Valonqar she thinks is Tyrion. This drives her hatred of Tyrion. What about the younger, more beautiful person who's going to be coming and taking everything that's hers? Who is that? She thinks it's Marjorie. That drives her forward. That drives the action. So that is what is most important to George R. R. Martin, not the actual truth or otherwise of a prophecy. So in the next book, we will get some more things coming true. I am absolutely sure that we'll be able to look at a few things and go, that's what that was referring to. Things like we saw in the House of the Undying, for example, Maggie the Frog's prophecies, they seem to be very clear. That kind of thing. There we will get some very strong answering of the truth or otherwise of prophecies, but that's not where his heart is. So we'll get some, but not lots. Lost for Words, thank you so much, Lost for Words. That is incredibly generous. Thank you. Thank you. And David Craig, also again, thank you again, very generous. Thank you. That is very kind of you. And the Clueless Fangirl. Well, lots of very generous people. Thank you all very much. That means a lot. And the Purple Lord Leo Anansi also. Lauren Turner, what do you think George has planned for Sansa? Do you think his plan for her changed when he saw what the show did with her? Well, I mean, his overall plan for Sansa at a very high level, the same in the terms of she's going to learn the lessons that what she thought when she headed down to King's Landing, the rose-tinted view of the world, that is not true. I think that she is going to grow as a politician. I think that she's going to grow as a leader. I think that she will take lessons from all of these teachers that she's had, good and bad. Let's not forget she's had an impressive array, if impressive is the right word, of mentors and teachers. Cersei, Littlefinger, Tyrion, even the Hound, people like that. She has been able to learn from people all the way through, and we're starting to see that bit by bit in the last few chapters of hers that we've had, her starting to apply these lessons. That is going to lead up to the point where she, all this time, she has been on her own. She has not been able to trust anybody because everybody around her is, to one extent not or another, not on her side. I've been doing my reread of book one, re-listen as it happens, and I've got up to Sansa 3, 4, and it's suddenly Jane Poole gets sent away, and then from that moment on, it becomes very apparent she is on her own. There's no one else. All the other Starks have been killed around her, or they've escaped. She is the only person that she knows. Everybody around her wants things from her, and she is going to have to carve out for herself a position where she feels safe. And the only place that ultimately she will be able to feel safe is when there's nobody who has control of her. She is in control of her own destiny, and that means being a Lady of Winterfell. So that's the high level arc that she's going to be going on. The big difference is that obviously she is not going to be handed over to Ramsay. That on the show, that was she was dropped in there because in the books it's Jane Poole, but they thought it would well, to cut the story down to its bare bones, they included her within that there. That will not happen. But the overall arc and her heading up to Winterfell will definitely happen in this next book. Okay, so Matthew Kidd, thank you very much. Swagger Dagger, thank you very much. That's very kind. Brahim Ayahi, what do you think about Darkstar and Dawn and his plans in the south? I think he will ultimately... He wants to be the Sword of the Morning, or he may call himself the Sword of the Evening. I think he will get the Sword Dawn. I think he will head across all of Dawn, is going to pull in behind Fagon. There are many reasons for that I can get into if anyone's interested. And I think he will find himself as a part of Fagon's Kingsguard. So I think that's where he's ultimately going to be heading up. Greasy Strangler, yeah, you asked about the Penny question. So I think I did put it on here somewhere, but you were wondering whether George R. Martin is doing some wordplay with Penny. Penny is a book-only character. She's a dwarf as well, who becomes attached to Tyrion, and so she's not a particularly sympathetic character, but Tyrion definitely does not treat her well. Now, the dwarf's Penny is something which we've already seen earlier. This was a tax which Tywin did, a tax on brothels, which if you used a brothel, the tax was 1 penny, and because Tyrion was technically master of coin at the time, people called it the dwarf's penny. So is George R. Martin doing a bit of a wordplay here that maybe she is going to prove more useful and he won't realize it, or something along those lines? I think certainly what is happening here is that that was something that he had no control of and he was blamed for. Suddenly, however, Tyrion here, I think he will realize that he did have control of this situation, and so it's a sort of a flip. And if something tragic, and I suspect it probably will, tragic and bad, does happen to Penny, he will actually look back and say, actually, that was my fault. Unlike before when that wasn't, this, and I got the blame for it. This one, yeah, probably was my fault. So I think that is where Tyrion's going, is trying to reclaim who he is as a person. And so we should be looking within the Winds of Winter, as happened in Dance with Dragons, we should be looking for a lot of these kind of incidents where he can look at himself critically to understand who he is as a person. And I think that his relationship with Penny will be one of those instances. Lady Pushkin saying, I feel no shame in how fuddy-duddy I am. I've no idea of the context of that, but you should feel no pain with how fuddy-duddy or not you are. Clueless Fangirl again, thank you so much. Oh, did I read that one out already? It's possible I did. Ebenezer Germer, is Dawn the original Ice? Thoughts on that theory? Dawn the Sword, the original Ice. Possibly. So the idea is so the sword Dawn. The legend has it that this, in millennia ago, this a meteorite fell, landed on Starfall, and from the metal within that was forged the sword Dawn. And that has been in the hands of House Dane ever since. The sword Ice up in Winterfell, there is that sword itself, the Valyrian steel sword appears to only be, say, 400 years old, something like that. But there are hints that perhaps a sword ice had existed before that. Question is, what happened to that? I don't think there needs to be a mystery here. I think that there is a very reasonable set of iterations of events that they had a ceremonial sword, and then all of the cool houses were getting Valyrian steel swords, and House Stark went, well, we should have one of those. And so they got this fantastic new sword, called it Ice because that was the name of the sword of House Stark, and then the old one, I don't know, whatever, they retired it, they gave it to someone. There doesn't need to be a mystery here. There is, for me and my many, there is no clear connection between that and the sword Dawn down with House Dane. There's no link there in particular, and we seem to have two histories going on at the same time. This sword was down here, and we have lots of tales of what happens with the sword Dawn. The sword Ice was up in Winterfell. We have lots of stories about what happened there. So there doesn't seem to be a point where, or I should say, there appeared to be points where they were clearly two separate swords. So I don't think that there's a mystery there. The bigger mystery when it comes to Sword Dawn is whether this was Lightbringer, Azor Ahai's legendary sword. And the two things that we have there, the first is the name, obviously. Dawn and Lightbringer, the echoes there are very clear. And secondly, this is the only sword we have that could be Lightbringer. It's thousands of years old. That's the only sword out of all of the ones that we're told about that is a possible candidate. So I tend to think it probably is, but in terms of the original question about Ice and Dawn, I tend to think that probably isn't the case. R. Tyler McLam, thank you so much. And okay, let's go with Thomas de Kirschmacher saying, food question. Love a food question. Could the honeyed locusts not have been poisoned, but strong Belwas was just allergic? Maybe it was an attempt on his life, or Hisdar seeing as Dany doesn't like them. Yeah, so I did a video on this. Well, not that specifically, but I did cover it in a video about who was the Harpy, and it seems very clear to me that this was not an attempt on Dany's life. She's never been a fan of honeyed locusts. She's never even been a fan of any particularly rich food. She always seems, and it's, I'm indebted to someone on Reddit who I can't even remember who they are, but whoever they are, hat tip to them, who went through looking at everything that Dany had eaten all the way through the 5 books, and pointed out that she really likes quite plain, dull food. She has flatbreads and olives, maybe a small glass of wine. She doesn't ever have any strong flavors. She seems very measured in what she eats. So anyone who's got the foggiest idea of what her eating habits are would not have gone with the honeyed locusts. Besides which, this was an incredibly vague way of trying to assassinate somebody, just leaving them lying out there. And secondly, the people who you would expect to want her to assassinate her, they'd just got everything that they wanted. The fighting pits were reopening. This is not the time to be assassinating her. The important point, again, is not the truth of who did it. The important point is how people reacted to it, and the fact that this got painted as an assassination attempt on Dany, and the fact that Barristan believes it, and therefore basically puts Hisdar under house arrest and launches a coup, effectively That's the important point about what's going on here. Robin Isamar. Hi, Robert. Hope you and Dan are well. Thank you. Which storylines or characters do you think were most affected by George R. R. Martin skipping his planned 5-year gap? I suspect that Rickon won't be much more than a pawn for the Manleys. He'll be too young to do anything himself. Greetings from Robin and Peppy at the Summer Cottage. That sounds delightful, Robin and Peppy. I hope you're enjoying it there. It's an interesting question. So in terms of what has been most affected by the lack of the planned 5-year gap, and for those who don't know, this was something that George R. R. Martin was originally he was going to have like a trilogy, but at some point in his writing, he thought he would have a 5-year gap around the period when things naturally paused to allow the dragons to grow up when Arya's off in Bravos and things like that, to allow everybody just to age up a little bit. What's going to be the biggest the things that are most affected by it? I don't think that the overall plot line will be affected. I think that's the point, that he decided he could carry on doing this without the 5-year gap. What I think I find most interesting about this is that what the implications therefore are for having characters that much younger, because Bran is he's still a child here, and that adds a completely different spin to what's going on. If you add in a 5-year gap of him training up to be the three-eyed crow, then he's a teenager. But here, as he was obviously on the TV show, but here when he returns back, he's still going to be less than 10 years old. He's still not old. He is still a child. So how he is treated will be very differently. He won't be treated with the same kind of deference, perhaps. Pardon me. He will still be treated pretty much as a child. So it's what this means for the characters is the thing that I would personally find quite interesting. The Gaia, thank you so much for the donation. Evan the Squirrel, very generous. Thank you so much for that. Reflective Rambling saying, I feel terrible for IDG's sniffles, but I have to admit I half expect him to start growling at us when his voice dips at times. A bit of fight or flight instinct kicking in. I'm not planning on growling at you, but yeah, I've got a bit of a cold going on at the moment, so apologies if that's coming through. Matthias Corvinus, where do you think the Stormlands derive their power from? Not entirely sure what you mean by their power. If you mean their physical power, there's the armies of the Stormlands are quite small, but they have got quite a strong martial history, partly because of the fact that they are always on that barrier with Dawn, that for a very long time the Marcher Lords are there, a constant battle going on with Dawn, and obviously out to sea they are the Stormlands, and so this is very much a battle against the elements everywhere they go. And the Stormland is quite small, but they've got mountainous regions, they've got huge forests, they've got coastal regions, the stormy seas. They've got a lot going on in quite a small area. So if that's what you are talking about, that's the history. They've got a strong martial history because they have been at war quite a lot. Okay, let's go. Jeremy McKenna saying, going to have to donate after the live stream. My phone is being stupid. Well, I'm sorry your phone is being stupid, but if you are watching this after the live stream, you can still donate. There will be a link down in the description or somewhere around underneath the screen, and I will leave this open. Lady Dane. Robert, I am getting a bit tired of people not realizing that Jon is not like Whites because he never died. His spirit was held elsewhere, a different thing than most of the other resurrections we've seen. Anyway, what is bothering you most about what we all keep going on about? Is anything getting on your nerves besides the wait for the new books? I don't think anything's getting on my nerves so much. I do. One thing that probably comes out in these kind of live streams, I tend to try to go for Occam's razor whenever I can, in that the simplest solution is almost always right. And I think that George R. R. Martin tends to. And I think that because we've had a 10-year gap now, 10 years and counting, that we tend to look for ever more complex solutions to things. Most of the big issues we've probably got about as far as we can based on the information we have, and most of the things have been analyzed to death. So I think that the desire to find extra layers of complication when actually they do not need to be is something that I'm constantly pushing back against. And in particular, is such and such a person secretly such and such an other person. George R. R. Martin has got a lot of characters who are secretly someone else, but that doesn't mean that everybody has to be it. That doesn't mean that nobody has died and everybody is going off somewhere else. So I think we need to take a step back sometimes and just say, you know what, that character is dead. The most likely scenario here is this person isn't somebody in disguise. They are actually who they seem to be. So that's the thing that I probably bang on about the most, I would say. Anonymous, thank you so much for the donation. Val Law saying, do you think the others, the White Walkers, could be good in inverted commas? I don't think good is the word I would use. They certainly seem to be proactively hunting down and killing people, which in my book is not good. But they certainly may be wronged. Now, George R. R. Martin often comes back to the quote that everyone is a hero in their own story. And this is true for the others as well as anyone else. They don't, they're not just this amorphous mass of machines coming forward to kill humans just because they're baddies. They are doing this for a reason. And the reason is almost certainly not just it's in our nature to kill. It is because they're trying to achieve something. It's because they feel they've been wronged and are trying to get revenge. There will be a reason, and we will get to understand this reason. So, no, I don't think they're going to turn out to be good. I don't think George R. R. Martin would want us to see any characters, with the possible exception of a few paragons of virtue like Brienne and Sam. I don't think you want to see us to see as any characters as good, but I think that we shouldn't see them as just pure expressions of evil. Ice and fire are not evil. Ice and fire are ways that the world could be destroyed, and in a way they're almost neutral. And that is the kind of the feel that George R. R. Martin is trying to put to us. It's the struggle to survive against ice and fire that's if anything, the moral battle. AJ Borker, thank you very much for the donation. Misting, thank you. Also Anonymous. So question from My on 3690 saying, is Dan doing all right? He has already taken himself to bed. Yes, as he often does. He was a bit unwell, unfortunately, but he is recovering well. Thank you very much for asking. And Lady Pushkin saying, amazing donations. I agree. Thank you, everyone. I hugely appreciate this. I said I would come back to this. This is a charity stream. I try to do these a couple of times a year. I think it's really important that we use whatever we have to try and be a force for good in this world, just to try and, if we have the resources, to try and share them where they are needed best. Alzheimer's is a horrible disease. It is horrible not just on the people who suffer from it, but also the people who care for people who suffer from it. So it's also something that affects millions, and I suspect during the pandemic has been hugely damaging behind the scenes, and people in lockdown. If you are caring for somebody with Alzheimer's in lockdown, it will be even more horrendous. Similarly, if you have Alzheimer's during lockdown, I can't imagine it. But research is very, very slowly making some really important progress in this area. Ways of identifying it early, opportunities to slow it down, hopefully at some point a cure. Science is the way out of this, and research and is the way that this is going to be defeated. So it's really important that money goes into that, so that we can actually see a way through this in the long run. So if you do have some money to spare, I would love it if you could contribute. So thank you very much. That's why I'm doing this. As I say, I do these a couple of times a year. There'll be another one at Christmas. Shauna Bass, thank you very much. Anonymous, thank you. And having a quick flick through. Ebenezer Gama saying, which storyline is most interesting to you? If you were forced to choose a POV from the Winds of Winter, who would you choose to read? Always Tyrion. Tyrion's I feel that George R. R. Martin, and he said that this Tyrion he enjoys writing, and I think it shows through. Tyrion is the character that he uses to show us what's really going on as much as anything else, and he is the character that is going to be linking this story together. Now, so when he, just looking in book one, he obviously knows the Lannisters to start with. He goes to Winterfell, meets the Starks, meets Theon, heads north to the Wall, sees all of that, comes back, goes to the Eyrie, meets all of those people, comes back, goes to King's Landing, meets all of those people, gets caught up in Fagon's group. He's going to go over to Team Daenerys in a bit, meet all of them. He is the person who, more than anyone else, ties all of this together. So his is the POV that I am most looking forward to, because he will start to be able to draw the links between the different things that are happening. And it's his levels of understanding which will start to teach us things. George R. R. Martin has dropped hints about the fact that, for example, Dany was given books by Ser Jorah, books about dragons, and he was asked, did Dany read those books? And he sort of shrugged and said, well, no, she's not so much of a reader, but you know who is a reader? Tyrion. So Tyrion almost certainly will be discovering things. He's already written a book about dragons, so as well as everything else, he is going to be the person who's going to give us the knowledge about dragons. He's going to be able to tie people together with Fagon. He is going to be able to, having already made a connection with Jon, when they left, they shook hands and called each other friends. That is going to be hugely important. So yeah, his is the POV chapter for me that I go to. First of all, Anonymous, thank you so much for the donation, and another one from Anonymous. Matthew Dominique saying, I'm very thankful for you doing this, Robert. I don't have any family members directly hit by Alzheimer's, but I have or am known in very similar effects in my family. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. It affects a huge amount of people. Mike Hall saying Tyrion doesn't even do anything in his The Winds of Winter chapter. He just listens to what's happening and makes dirty jokes. It's true. But also he does a few things that will alter the course of history. He gets the Second Sons to shift sides effectively, and he manages to get himself into a position where, having promised lots of money that he does not have, to win his freedom, to allow himself to put himself before Dany, and that will be very important. Yes, he's not always doing things. His chapters are not always about him achieving things, but he thinks about stuff in a way that most other characters don't. Mr. Man Jones saying, in a way, Tyrion, Dany, and Jon are the past, future, and present. Jon is fighting an old threat. Dany wants to reform the world, and Tyrion is dealing with the world as it is. Yeah, interesting take. I like that. Okay, let's go to a question from Carla Simpulos. Hi, Robert. I would love to know your thoughts on the Children of the Forest, and whether you think any sort of romantic relations or mating happened with the Children of the Forest and the First Men, and if so, which characters in the current story connect with the lineage of such events? Yes, almost certainly. I think this is probably part of how the magic of the Children of the Forest, the old magic, Green Seer magic, has become a part of First Men inheritance. I think that is probably where this came from. Almost certainly all the hints are that there in the past have been strong links between the Crannog men and the Children of the Forest, but I think probably there were others elsewhere. So yes, I think is the short answer. And although we'll probably not see specifically an example of this, I think that we will we'll see the results of this throughout, as this is where the Green Seer powers come from. Shmanka Angel Heart saying, my first question as a Patreon. Well, welcome. Good to be here, you say. Well, it's fantastic to have you here. As a bit of a novice of the books, can you explain to me the point of Arya going to train with the Faceless Men, if, as I've heard or understood, she won't be killing the Freys for the Red Wedding or going ahead to kill Cersei, etc.? Can you explain her arc to me and the main plot points you feel she will be involved in that take advantage of her training? Thanks and best wishes. So yes, I can do. So she I think if we take a step back for a moment, in terms of character arc, I think we sometimes view this as just being a very smooth thing. Character goes from one place to another. Sansa's story, as I've seen it, as we've all seen it so far, and as I've described earlier in this, is quite a smooth and clear character arc. She starts in Winterfell, doesn't want to be there, wants to be down south, has a view of the world that will eventually lead her full circle. She goes down to King's Landing, discovers that her view of the world is not right, eventually starts to long to go back to Winterfell and embrace who she the person that she could have been at Winterfell but rejected. So her character arc is very clear and smooth. Others will not necessarily be like that. Now, I think Arya's is one of those that is not necessarily going to be like that. It starts off very clear. She, like Sansa, as I was saying earlier, she loses everything. She gets this series of mentors, Syria Farrell, the Hound, Then Jack and Hagar, the kindly man, that are all about death and murder and killing. And this seems to be taking her in one direction. But always there's this tension because she's staying Starkish. She wants to be a Stark, that she's holding on to that. She's holding on to her link with Nymeria. That's keeping on going. She is not becoming a faceless assassin. That's not where she's going. She's not giving up on her own identity. So already we're seeing that her character arc is not going to be that kind of smooth line that starts off with here's an innocent girl learning how to stab people with the pointy end, ending up with her being a killer assassin killing everyone. That's not what the line is. She is going to reach some point at which she has an accommodation between what she has learned and who she has become, and also who she always was, a Stark. So in terms of the not killing, the phrase for the Red Wedding, that's not on her list to start with. That's not in her prayer. And there are other characters who were not really included on the show who do have very similar revenge missions. Lady Stoneheart is the clear example. Also, Nymeria herself, the direwolf, has a super PAC that George R. Martin has been very clear is going to come into play. So there are other actors there. Arya is not the only person killing enemies of the Starks. There are other people doing that. And I think that we will get to a point where Arya, she has to make a decision as to whether to go down this route of just being a murderous assassin, or whether she wishes to take the step back and not do that. They did this on the show. I talked about this a few weeks ago because it's one of the things I think they did quite well, very rushed, but I think they did quite well, but got completely overlooked, which is that she, on the show, was heading down to King's Landing to finish off her list, and then the Hound turns to her and basically says, do you want to be like me? Because I'm just going, this is it for me. I'm going to kill people and die. Is that really what you want? I think you should turn back. And she decides to turn back, and she decides to embrace another part of her character. And that is a character arc. It does not have to be this just one long line going all in the same direction. She can get to a point and then decide, you know what, I'm not going to go there. And that, I think, is the one of the points of Arya, is that she will reach a decision point where she says, no, I'm not going there. Certainly it's going to happen with the Faceless Men. She is not going to give up her Stark identity. So we've already got half of this happening. Then, pardon me, then it's a matter of what happens after that. Is she going to carry on just with the murderous assassin thing or not? Sean Bass saying, I want at least one Stark to go dark. Like, give us at least one of them that doesn't end up squeaky clean. I don't think any of them are going to end up squeaky clean, if that helps. Jonathan Garza, thank you so much. Anonymous, thank you so much. And another anonymous donation as well. So no, I don't think any of them are going to end up squeaky clean. I think Bran, being an all-seeing tree wizard who is manipulating things behind the scenes, is not squeaky clean. I think Sansa will end up as a strong ruler, but I don't think that's going to make her squeaky clean. I think that she is going to be quite a clear politician with she will rule in a strong way, not taking any prisoners. I think that Arya is not going to end up squeaky clean. Just because she decides that she's not going to end up being driven by revenge and death for the rest of her life doesn't mean that she's going to be squeaky clean. It just means that she's not going to be a merciless assassin for the rest of it. And Rickon, I don't think is going to end up. I think he is currently the closest thing to a feral Stark that we've got, so he's not going to be ending up squeaky clean. I don't think any of them personally will be able to be described as squeaky clean. Okay. Pardon me. So, Mara Lee question. You've mentioned in previous live streams that we may see a scouring of the Shire with Euron and Cersei. If that's so, where will it take place? And who will be the key players in the battle to defeat them? Yeah, so this is something, I mean, I should say this isn't me saying that, I'm not making this up. This is what George R. R. Martin has said. We often say, what's the ending of Song of Ice and Fire going to be? George R. R. Martin says bittersweet, but then he, in that time that he said bittersweet, he then went on to describe what he meant as bittersweet, and he gives us two examples, both from The Lord of the Rings, one of which was Frodo. Frodo, yes, saves the day with a bit of help from Sam, but he is broken by it, and he cannot live to enjoy the fruits of his success. That's one bit of bittersweet. And the other thing he mentions is the scouring of the Shire, this penultimate chapter of The Lord of the Rings, where, spoilers, Saruman takes over the Shire and turns it bad, basically. And so when our heroes return after saving the world, they have to fight one last battle to save their own home. And they use the skills and confidence that they've gained through all their adventures to help them do that. So that's what the Scouring of the Shire is. And George R. R. Martin has said, if you want to know what it's going to be like, that's the feel I'm going for. So it's not me thinking that this is the Scouring of the Shire. This is what George R. R. Martin's saying. So where's it going to be? Who's going to be involved in this? Well, I think Cersei and Euron. I think Euron is very much going to be like the Saruman character here. He's going to be a big baddie, but not the big baddie. And yes, I think he'll probably be left over at the end. Where will it be? Could be King's Landing, or it could be Harrenhal. I think this. The more I read the story and think about it, the spiritual heart of this story is in that small area around Harrenhal, the Inn at the Crossroads, the Isle of Faces, the God's Eye Lake. That area seems to be the spiritual home of this story, and there's certainly a sort of an Aemond one-eye, Euron one-eye link across there, riding a dragon, fighting a dragon battle up above the God's Eye Lake, that I think there's an echo that's going to be happening there. As for who's going to be involved in it, well, the cripples, bastards, and broken things, the people who survive, the people who have been broken by this event, but emerge on the other side, stumbling, broken, out of breath, but having to do one last thing. So that's what we're looking at, I think. Question from Fletcher Reed saying, what is the future of Sam Tarly in the rest of A Song of Ice and Fire? Well, I think it's not it's not going to be particularly shocking. He's gone to Old Town. He's going to learn a lot while he's in Old Town, and then he's going to head back north with that knowledge, which will help in the battle in the north, and the Horn of Winter, which he has got and he has kept. He won't have known beforehand that it's the Horn of Winter, but I suspect that he will learn it. So that's going to be his role, and then he'll head back up north, and he will spread the information which to the people who need it in Winterfell, which will help in the battle against the others. But as I've said many times, this is not just a matter of whoever's got the biggest and best army is going to win. Everything that he's learning in terms of the fight is just a matter of slowing things down so that the ultimate solution can be reached. but it's about information for him. Morally, when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. How much do you think he knows of Jon Snow's true heritage? I think he knows almost all of it. I think he's very, very aware. I think that he not only is aware of it, I think that he helped shape it. Now, if you go back, I've got a whole series of videos about Bloodraven, my When in Doubt, Blame Bloodraven series. And he very, very clearly, in my view, was pruning the Targaryen family tree to make sure that the genetics were right from his perspective. This is eugenics. This isn't nice, but this is what he's doing, which he thinks is for the betterment of the greater good. And this is in order to create Jon. And I think that who has got the right mix of Targaryen and Stark. And he has been guiding Jon all the way through this. Jon is his chosen champion. Jon is the person he sees as being the last hero, Azor Ahai reborn. He has been there guiding him through Ghost. He has been there guiding him through Mormont's Raven and various other ways as well, I'm sure. So he is absolutely, he knows this, he shaped it, he was behind it. Howland's little sister, I've always had difficulty understanding the progression of the Azor Ahai legend and its status within the general population of the Seven Kingdoms. What confuses me is the fact that some people know about it and others don't. How well known throughout Westeros is this prophecy? As readers, we are well acquainted with the story of Azor Ahai and Nissa. Is this something that everyone knows about? Is this forgotten, misunderstood tidbit of mythology? Well, it is complicated. I think the thing that we have to remember is that we are reading this from the perspective of the 1%, the learned, the well-read. So they know all of these things. There are various legends about what happened in the first long night. Azor Ahai is a legend mostly from Essos. It's come across, obviously, the priests of R'hllor are very into it. They have brought it across, so people are aware of it. People like Tyrion mention it. In Westeros, certainly in the north, it's the legend of the last hero that is the one that is known best, and that is known by the people as a whole, not just the well-read. There's also the prince that was promised. That seems very much to be a very focused prophecy that only a few people really care about, and the like. This came through the woods, which seemed to introduce this concept. It may well have been around before, but the idea of the prince that was promised coming through the Targaryen line, a specific bit of the Targaryen line, is there. So how well known is it? It's known by different people to different amounts. It's the thing that I find fascinating about the Azor Ahai prophecy is how the story that we have, it doesn't actually tell much about what Azor Ahai actually does. The main bit of story legend that we have is about the forging of Lightbringer and killing Nissa, calling forth the Lightbringer. The fact that this is then going to be used to kill the others, fight the others, we're not actually then told what happens next. The story of the last hero is more about that bit there. So maybe the two stitch together, but George R. R. Martin's very clear. These are myths, these are legends. We shouldn't take them as literal truths of what happened. Azor Ahai, long story short, in Essos is better known. In Westeros, some people know it, but it's certainly in the north. The better known legend is that of the last hero. Let's go to a question from Whitney. saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you enjoyed your birthday. Here's to many more." Thank you very much. I did. We know George R. R. Martin keeps the details of how magic works a mystery to the readers and the characters as well. When it comes to the Targaryens and their blood magic, how in your mind do you suppose they were able to link their DNA with that of dragons to literally become blood of the dragon? Was it magic or science or both? Also, what is your favourite mystery in A Song of Ice and Fire? I'll come back to the favourite mystery in a moment. In terms of the linking of the Valyrians to dragons, I subscribe fully to this idea that there is some kind of gene splicing going on. The Valyrians were all over this. They did it a lot, mixing different types of animals. And it makes absolute sense. If you want probably the best explanation I've seen of this, if you go to the Disputed Lands channel, she's got a couple of videos on this. The idea is that the Valyrians have a very teeny tiny bit of dragon DNA in them now, through science, for want of a better name, the gene splicing, magical gene splicing, because this is a magical world, that they managed to do that, and that is what creates this bond with dragons. So is it magic? Is it science? It's a bit of both, and I don't think in a magical world we can draw a clear line through to say it's necessarily one or the other. In terms of my favourite mystery in A Song of Ice and Fire at the moment, simply because I've just finished writing a video on it, it will come out at some point in the next few days, it's what happened to Benjen. When you are rereading book one, there are so many of these mysteries which have been set up, some of which are explained, some of which haven't yet. Who is Jon Snow's mother's one obviously comes up a lot. Who ordered the assassination of Bran is another mystery that's there, plays through a long way. There are lots of these mysteries, but one which clearly drives the action is what happened to Benjen. They think about this so much. Jon thinks about him almost every chapter in book one. Where's Benjen gone? The Gerald Mormont queries it. They have these conversations about, well, he knows what he's doing. He's clearly very good. He sent out 3 different search parties before the Great Ranging to try and find out what happened to him. They found some marks that he left that took him certainly the other side of the haunted forest. What happened then? We get some more clues, but we're never told. And surely we will get some kind of answer on that. That doesn't necessarily mean we will find out exactly, but it's not the kind of thing that can be, I think, literarily, I don't think George R. Martin is just going to leave it there forever, just hanging. He's going to give us something, some hint at least as to what happened with Benjen. Anonymous, thank you so much for the donation. Jakey's Jacket, what are your thoughts on the mirroring of Arya and Bruce Wayne? Where might it go? I've not thought about the mirroring of Arya and Bruce Wayne. I think, well, let's work this out. So Arya was orphaned, Bruce Wayne was orphaned. They both then go off to train to be killer assassins. But I think that's probably where it ends, because Bruce Wayne obviously then he's a billionaire and he does everything himself, and he sets himself up to do stuff, and he also is trying to battle crime so that the same thing doesn't happen to other people. He's got this nobler ambition, which is obviously dark and all the rest of it, but he has a sort of a nobler ambition in there, whereas Arya is just killing people out of vengeance, frankly, just the people who she has a grudge against. But good question. I've not really thought that through. Maybe people in the chat can come up with some more links across between the two. Lawndock20, hello Robert, I know he's an extremely minor character, but do you think we will ever see Stone Snake again? The wildlings don't claim to have killed him, and Jon even recalls at one point that he's still unaccounted for. Also, Corin mentions that if anyone can make it back to the wall on foot, it would be him. Okay, so he's he is a minor character. He was one when Jon and Corin head off. They get sent off to go and have a hunt down, look for the wildlings. He escapes. Jon obviously gets caught up with all the wildlings. Corin dies. Stone Snake, who is known as the best climber in the Night's Watch, he escapes basically and is just never heard from again. So will we hear from him again? Possibly. My general feeling is that if he was, that was a goodly time ago in the books now. If presumably he would have gone back to the Fist of the First Men and then headed down to the wall from there, and he should have been back already, and he's not. So my instinct is that probably he died. So probably we won't hear from him. He's not as big a character, but Benjen, I think we have to have some resolution on that with him. I think it's probably, it just adds to the world that he just disappears, because people do just disappear. So yeah, it'd be nice to round that one off, but I don't think we will. Sirius saying, do you think we will ever get a Zack Snyder cut treatment after the books get out? Do you mean of the TV show? No, I don't think so. No. I think that's it now for the main books. They may well do them again at some point. I'm sure HBO have got the rights to do them, and they've kept the rights to do them for quite a long time. So I don't think we're going to see anything there. No, it's the short answer. Wayne Thomas saying Batman famously doesn't kill people. Yeah, good point. Again, another difference. Carl Karsnock quoting Arya is just killing people. Robert 2021. She is. Koski 1885, thank you very much for the donation. Anonymous, thank you very much for the donation. Reflective rambling, with the war settled, how will the migration in Westeros, how will populations shift, or opportunities and importance in regions shift after it's all ended? Well, I think the interesting thing after everything has ended will be there will be a lot less people, and also the seasons will be put back in balance. That's almost certainly going to be the case. So we will not see this. George R. Martin is not going to give us a 20 years later. I'm pretty sure. So we're not going to see it, but probably we will see the wildlings head back north once they can, because that's where they come from. That's their homeland. Why wouldn't they? And I think most people will probably stay roughly where they are, because that's what they like. There will be huge amounts of people who have been displaced, and Dany will have brought across a huge amount of people. So whereas on the TV show they kind of just skated over what happens with the Dothraki, what happens with the Unsullied, this is lots of people. There are also going to be several massive groups of sellswords coming over as well. What's going to happen with all of these people? They will probably have to settle somewhere. The thing, or one of the many things that I just picked up on my read through again, Tyrion makes promises, a lot of promises to people, and they're in his chapter when he is recruiting the hill clans. The chapter's theme is all about a Lannister always keeps their promises, and we're shown that he paid the money to Maud, the jailer that he owed. He talks about having to fulfill his debt against his father, which obviously there was a lot of foreshadowing of Tywin being killed. That is a Lannister keeping their paying their debts. And he ends it by promising the hill clans that they will get the Vale, that he will give it to them. Is that if he does end up in a position of being something like Hand of the King, is he going to pay them like that? It's possible. We certainly know they're hanging around. So the people that he actually promised it to are still there. So yeah, maybe he will. So there's lots of intriguing possibilities. Alex Turles, thank you so much for the donation. Jamie McKenna saying, see previous question about Sam above. Sorry, couldn't tag you. I'll see whether I can find it quickly. Carl Kosnock saying, Sam the Slayer can or will become Sam the Surgeon in the long run, the anti-Qyburn. If that's the one you were talking about, that kind of makes sense to me. The anti-Qyburn, I do like. I'm just seeing whether I can find Jamie McKenna. Here we go. The actor who played Sam on the show had an interesting take on his character. He didn't see him as purely good, but more of a master manipulator to push his own agenda to protect himself or Gilly. Yes, that's interesting. I mean, I don't think master manipulator is quite the way of it. I think that, yes, he is trying to protect himself and Gilly. That's right. I don't think he's particularly masterful at it. But I think that he is fundamentally a good person, and he is very much one of these people who's introduced early on as being one of the cripples, bastards, and broken things. That will carry him through. So yeah, I mean, no characters are perfectly good, but he's one of the better ones, I would say. Question from Dan McKay. What do you know about George R.R. Martin's writing technique? Does he do it all by himself or with assistant writers? What's the division of roles if he has assistants? Endlessly rewriting drafts of chapters or finalizing one chapter before moving the next, and so on. Anything you do know might be interesting. Yeah, so we know a reasonable amount because he tells us a reasonable amount. He says quite a lot that he is a Gardner writer, by which he means that he doesn't structure it all to start with. And indeed, if you read his original pitch of the story to his editors, it's very different to what we've ended up getting. He allows the story to develop through the characters as he is writing it. So as a character comes into a certain situation, he then allows that character to react as that character rather than trying to force them into a structure that he decided when so that's his overall approach. Increasingly, I suspect he is realizing that as he gets towards the end of the story, he is starting to close off the avenues of his gardening. He's created a lot of his garden already, and we can see where it's going. He does foreshadowing, for example. When you have that kind of thing, then you're putting things on a certain path that they then have to carry on going down. In terms of how he writes, he does write it all himself. It's not a team of people writing for him. He has some assistants who work with him, but they're not co-writing it with him. They help him out with a huge range of stuff. They sort of work on a tag team thing. When he's up in his mountain retreat, then they sort of have a couple of weeks on and off, and then sort of swap in and out their assistants. He has a small group of people that he trusts to send a draft to his editors. He talks about his US and UK editors, that he seems to use both of them, and a few key writers that, and not just writers, but close friends who he will give near final drafts to. People like Robin Hobb, incidentally, he's very close to. But generally speaking, he keeps it all himself. Even his wife Paris doesn't know what is happening with the characters, what will happen with the characters. He's been very clear. Even she doesn't get to know that. But his overall writing approach seems to be that he will write different chapters. Once he knows roughly what's happening in a book, he will write different chapters and then maybe go back and rewrite one. Maybe he'll discover that a chapter that he's written that he thought was going to be in this book, he will push to a later book. Maybe he then realizes he needs to write an extra bit. Famously, the Red Wedding chapter, he kept to the very last chapter that he wrote in that book. He didn't want to write it because it was so traumatic, but eventually he kept on putting it off, and eventually he did it. And he does go back and revise things to the extent that he's told us that of the pre-released chapters, he's gone back and revised at least one of them. So he does this. It's a very iterative process. It's not linear. He seems to do a chapter at a time, but then come back to them whenever he needs to or wants to. And eventually he will get to the point of sending off big chunks to his editor. He did this. We had a report many years ago when he said, I've written 400 pages, 200 of final prose and 200 in draft to go to my editor. At the end of it all, once he thinks he's finished, he does what I think he calls it his final sweat through, where he goes through line by line and just does micro edits on things. Now, that is the point at which the book is nearly finished. Then he will send it off to his editors. Then they will come back with line edits. They're not going to come back and say, hey, I don't like where this story's going. It's his book, it's his story, he does that. But if they might query some details or a bit of grammar here or something like that, he will then go back through and yes or no to everything, and then it will get to be published. So that's his style. It's a gardening approach. It's very iterative. It is him who is doing it all, although he does have some trusted allies. Question from another one from Dan McKay saying, I think Shea was always Tywin's agent right from the beginning. Bronn wouldn't tell Tyrion which night he had taken Shea from, and Tywin knew about Shea being with Tyrion right away and told Tyrion not to take her to court, possibly partly because he didn't want to spare her. The revelation of Shea in Tywin's bed at the end means Bronn was working for Tywin as well, so Tyrion really had no one on his side. What do you think? Well, I would agree that if that were the case, it would be extra tragic. I mean, I don't think we will know, is the short answer. The fact that Tywin knew that Tyrion had a woman in his tent, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that Bronn took her from him. I think it's very unlikely that Bronn would have chosen to take a woman from Tywin's tent. Why would he? When he could have taken one from anyone else's. He's not stupid. Why would you do it to the commander? So I don't think at the beginning that's the case. However, Shea was a very sympathetic character on the show, slightly less in the books, a lot more complicated relationship going on in the books. And my guess is that this, as the balance of power within King's Landing shifted and Shea realized that the person that she had thought was going to be her protector within King's Landing, Tyrion, was no longer in a position to be able to protect her. That's the point at which she could then shift. Now, is it possible that she was all the way along, she was Tywin's agent? It's possible. I don't think we've got the evidence one way or another, but it also makes complete sense that this is a thing which happened a little bit later. Kai Johnson, thank you so much for the donation. Robinson88, George R. Martin does use writer's assistants. Ty McKell is one of his writer's assistants for A Song of Ice and Fire. She'll be a writer for House of the Dragon 2. Yeah, so, what I should clarify, he uses assistants. He doesn't use people to write stuff for him, which is a slight when it comes to his main story. Now, what that means is that yes, he will have people who he might sort of bounce stuff off of, but and they will do research for him. Obviously, Elio and Linda have done a lot of work for him, helping with the lore and a huge amount of background information in Westeros, and they co-wrote The World of Ice and Fire with him. But in the main story, yes, he has writing assistants, but they do not. He is the writer. They are not co-writers with him. If that distinction is clear there. Yeah, Matthew Kidd saying writing assistants, not assistant writers. Yeah, I think that you said it pithily and better than I did. Sina Jensen, probably mispronounced that. Apologies. Saying, hi, Robert, brand new patron here. Welcome. Though I have been following you for years. My question: do you think the end game? What do you think the end game of Val will be? Will she have a role to play besides perhaps pushing for the burning of Shireen? Thank you for all the great content. You're very welcome. In terms of Val, this is quite a hard one. I get asked this a lot. Maybe I will have a proper deep dive into Val's role going forward. I'm very clear that yes, she is going to be quite crucial in pushing for Shireen's burning. She's talked about this before, and I think given her position of influence at Castle Black, I think that's going to be very important. What's her end game? Well, she is one of the leaders of the free folk. Now, this means that she is going to be playing a role in whatever the free folk are going to be doing, the wildlings, during all of this. Some of them will be going with Jon down to Winterfell. Some of them will be holding the wall. Some of them will be going north to be trying to save a few more people. Now, so I think her role is in that management of the wildlings going forward. Longer term, I think she probably will survive, and I think that she will head north of the wall back with Jon and the wildlings. I think that she will, although she's being seen as she is not a wildling princess, but she is seen as that, and I think that she will be one of the leaders heading north after all of this. She's certainly got a lot of vibes of, sort of a cross between the Night's Queen and Ygritte, it has to be said, which is a bizarre sort of cross, but those are the vibes, the kind of the feel that's coming across from her. Jamie McKenna saying, just joined Patreon, finally. Welcome. That's fantastic. I'll look forward to seeing you over there. Okay, question from... have I got any more questions in the chat just to quickly pick up on... No, I'll go. I've got one more question from my patrons. Then I will try and dig through stuff in the chat. So now is a great time if you wish to do a donation, by the way. Perfect time for donations. So one more question from my patrons. Catherine Furseth. Hi, Robert. Great pick of charity for this stream. Thank you. As I say, it's, I think, really important work. George R. R. Martin originally planned to write A Song of Ice and Fire as a trilogy. You often say that this makes book one provide some meaningful hints and foreshadowings that would otherwise not be given so early in the story. In your opinion, what are the biggest foreshadowings in book one that would perhaps not have been there if George R. R. Martin had planned for 7 books from the start? Okay, really interesting stuff. So I think what we need to look out for here is the kinds of things that get mentioned a lot in book one and then not so much later on. That is because George R. R. Martin was thinking that he was laying the groundwork for a short series, and therefore had to drop in the foreshadowing there, whereas he would probably have dropped it in much later. So, for example, there's lots of foreshadowing and lots of discussion about Jon's parentage. This is discussed and thought about a huge amount. Similarly, the Isle of Faces, bizarrely, if you look at, I think the Isle of Faces is actually only named, it's not many times, I can't remember, it's something like 7 times in the entire story, but something like 4 of them are in book 1. It is clearly a very important focus. The Green Men, things like that, are mentioned in book 1, and then not later. That will become important. Bran and Dany, I think I would say, so Bran and Dany both have a lot of foreshadowing for who they are. The particular reread on Dany is that if you're imagining this as the first part of the trilogy, you're already seeing a change in Dany, where in book 1 she goes from being a very frightened, put upon character, who has her older brother is her abuser, basically, but she is very attached to him. By the end, partway through this, she's ordering his death. She's saying that he is not her brother. She's persuading Khal Drogo to be invading Westeros. We're already getting this movement within her to being a conqueror from a position where she wasn't to start with. So her movement in book 1 is incredibly rapid compared to her movement in the later books. Her movement in the later books is all about the growth of the dragons, and it seems her own growth in who she is as a character and what she is trying to achieve is a lot slower later on. So it's very fast to start with, and then it slows down. Ditto Bran. You get a huge amount of stuff early on, and then it slows down a lot. In fact, with Bran, it's noticeable that the amount of chapters we have with him slows down hugely. He only gets like 3 or 4 chapters in later books, and so the speed at which we get stuff is just a lot quicker to start with, and then slows down. So what are the biggest things? I think that we can draw out what the key themes are for the end by how much we get at the beginning. The Isle of Faces will be important. Jon's identity will be important. Dany wanting to invade Westeros will be important. Bran moving to a position where he likes the weirwood tree will be important. He starts off not liking it. By the end, he likes it. That kind of thing is what we see a lot of in book 1, and that is what is those are the clues towards how this is all going to end. Belladrine, thank you so much for the donation. Let's have a quick flick through. Mike Hall saying Val is a real princess in my heart. I know what you mean. I think she's a really well written character. Tyler Evans saying he stopped reading Patreon questions right before mine. This happens sometimes. Tyler, apologies if I didn't pick up on it. I tend to with Patreon. I put I have to put a time to stop editing because I have to cut and paste them into a document that works well for these live streams. Apologies. I will try and find that and answer that question if you've left a question over on Patreon. Kai Johnson, could you do a video breaking down how Robb Stark could have won the war, similar to the video you did on Sauron and the Lord of the Rings? Yeah, I think at some point I may well do one on the War of the Five Kings, a sort of a breakdown of that. I was certainly considering doing something along those lines. Reflective rambling. Is there a chance for agricultural states in Essos with famine, crop destruction in the west to get a step closer to having Iron Bank power through new trade power? Interesting. So I think I saw a few bits of debate there about sort of grain and things like that. The Westeros is going to have a food crisis in the next book. There is going to be famine. Littlefinger has been hoarding grain. King's Landing is almost certainly going to find itself running out of food very soon. The winter has come heavily in the north, and that is always a problem for food up in the north. So food is going to be an increasingly important part of this story. Yes. Is there a chance that some parts of Essos may gain extra power by exporting food at huge prices? It's possible, but at the same time, the Essos is also not particularly stable at the moment. We've got all across the south, the areas that Dany is involved in. They're being at war. Volantis is on the verge of being hit by mass insurrection amongst the masses, revolution probably led by the Red Priests. I think that the Dothraki are going to be heading west all the way across to hit places like Pentos. I think that Essos is not going to come off easily in this either. So yes, there is always a chance for people to make money when there is war, when it's winter, but I don't think it's going to be easy for anyone. Mist Man Jones, Theon notes that when Bloodraven ruled, the Starks and Lannisters joined to drive off Dagon Greyjoy. Could the Crow, Lion, and Wolf work together to stop Euron as he increases in power? Possibly, but I think that the Lannisters are going to join up with the Greyjoys in that. I think Cersei and Euron will join forces, and it will then be a matter of who's going to fight him at the end. Anonymous, thank you so much for the donation. I think with this, actually, Mattia Dominique saying, I saw on your Twitter that you watched Loki. What are your thoughts on the last episode? Well, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who have watched the last episode. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole series. I thought it was, I like what Marvel have done so far with things like this and with WandaVision. They're not just doing standard superhero fare. They're actually trying to give us things coming from a slightly different angle. What can I say in a non-spoilery way? I really loved the character that was introduced in that last episode. I thought that they were really good and really fun. I thought the possibilities coming out from the end of it are huge. And I just enjoyed it as a whole, as a self-contained little series. Yeah, so I liked it. I liked it quite a lot. I'm not as into Marvel, I have to say, as some people. It's just something I watch and enjoy. So don't expect anything on the channel about it. That's just something I watch to have fun with. Okay, with that, I think I'm going to draw this one to a close. If you I'll be back next week, either next week or the week after. I will do a Lord of the Rings live stream, so that's something for Lord of the Rings fans, something to look forward to. If you would like to watch any more videos, if you're watching back a little bit later, there's going to be a link appearing somewhere around here to other live streams. There is a link appearing somewhere around here to my Patreon page. That's the best place to support this channel if you would like to do that. But the main thing about this stream is to get your support for what will appear down there somewhere, which is a link to Alzheimer's support, which is what this is all in favour of. If you have watched all the way through this live stream and you would like to show your appreciation, or you would just like to make the world a slightly better place, please, please, please do consider making a donation. I will leave this open for as long as the video is up. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care, and I will see you again next time.